Police are to be given greater powers to restrict protesters by allowing them to consider the cumulative impact of repeated demonstrations. The measures follow frequent pro-Palestinian demonstrations, including an event in London on Saturday which saw almost 500 arrests. Home Secretary Sabina Mahood said repeated large-scale protests had caused considerable fear for the Jewish community. Israel and Hamas are preparing for indirect negotiations in Egypt on Monday as hopes build for a possible ceasefire in Gaza after Benjamin Netanyahu said a hostage release could be announced in the coming days. And lawyers for Sean Diddy Combs are planning to appeal after Grammy-winning artist was sentenced to more than 4 years in prison on Friday. Combs was sentenced to 50 months or 4 years and 2 months in prison on 2 counts of transportation to engage prosecution. US District Judge Aaron Stubrarian also fined Combs $500,000, the maximum allowed.
This is STV Lunchtime News with Stephen Woolridge.
Good afternoon. Police are to be given greater powers to restrict protests by allowing them to consider the cumulative impact of repeated demonstrations. The measures follow frequent pro-Palestinian demonstrations, including an event in London on Saturday, which saw almost 500 arrests. Home Secretary Sabina Mahmood said repeated large-scale protests had caused considerable fear for the Jewish community, as our reporter Neil Connery reports.
Yesterday's protests in London against Palestine Action being made a prescribed terror organisation saw more than 500 people arrested. The government says police forces will now be granted powers to put conditions on repeat protests like these, including ordering them to be held elsewhere.
When the police are placing restrictions or conditions on a protest, they are allowed to take into account cumulative disruption, that is to say the frequency of protests by particular groups and in particular places. So at the moment it's not been absolutely clear whether that is something they can take into account before they place conditions, but I will be changing the law to make it absolutely explicit.
There were also protests in Manchester yesterday. The government says it will amend 2 sections of the 1986 Public Order Act to allow police to impose conditions if needed. It will also review existing laws to make sure powers are sufficient. But organisers of yesterday's event have called the measures an extraordinary affront to democracy.
It's a fundamental right of British democracy, of any democratic, system of governance, that a government, such as the Labour, government we have now, should be open to scrutiny, transparency and criticism.
In Bristol, around 100 anti-immigration protesters marched this afternoon. It's the 3rd time in 6 weeks. They were met by counter-demonstrators as police worked hard to keep order. Repeated protests like these could find conditions being imposed under the government's changes. Neil Connery, ITV News.
Israel and Hamas are preparing for an indirect negotiations in Egypt on Monday as hopes build for a possible ceasefire in Gaza after Benjamin Netanyahu said hostage release could be announced in the coming days. Speaking during a televised speech late on Saturday, the Israeli Prime Minister said he sent a delegation to Egypt to finalise technical details, adding that they aim to contain negotiations to a time frame of a few days. US President Donald Trump told CNN Hamas faces complete obliteration if it refuses to cede power in Gaza, as he pressured the militant group, as well as Israel, to move forward with its ceasefire negotiations. President Trump had welcomed Hamas' statement, accepting some elements of the US peace plan on Friday. Israel has repeatedly said it supports the new US deal. Under the 20-point plan, Hamas would release the remaining 48 Israeli hostages in Gaza, about 20 of whom are believed to be alive, within 3 days. The government would also have to disarm and relinquish their role in Gaza's governance. Israeli troops will be required to withdraw from Gaza, but the plan states that its forces would maintain a buffer zone which would be within the territory itself. Speaking to reporters outside the White House on Sunday, Trump said negotiations on the deal were going very well. They're in negotiation right now as we speak. He said it'll last a couple of days, we'll see how it works out. But I'm hearing it's going very well. He said his ceasefire proposal would be a great deal for Israel and the entire Arab world, adding that under the agreement, the hostages would need to come back almost immediately. Monday's discussions are set to take place in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, according to the Egyptian official and 3 Israeli sources. The negotiations will focus on the proposed exchange of hostages for Palestinian prisoners held by Israel, Egypt's foreign ministry has said. The US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the current situation is the closest we've come to getting all of the hostages released, but warned that there are a lot of opportunities for sabotage. Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar echoed his sentiments on Sunday, saying, "I hope that we are the closest to a hostage deal since a ceasefire deal in January." And finally, lawyers for Sean Diddy Combs are planning to appeal after the Germany-winning artist was sentenced to more than 4 years in prison on Friday. Combs was sentenced to 50 months, or 4 years and 2 months in prison on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. US District Judge Aaron Raniman also fined Combs $500,000, the maximum allowed. The sentencing comes 3 months after Combs was convicted of flying people across state lines for drug-fueled marathon sexual encounters. A jury acquitted the 55-year-old of racketeering, conspiracy and sex trafficking charges that could have carried a life sentence. However, the judge said the statute has to follow requires him to consider the nature of the offences and his history. The judge said a lengthy sentence was needed for deterrence and that he was unconvicted that if Combs is released, these crimes won't happen again. Prosecutors had called for an 11-year sentence for Combs, who was convicted in July. Defence lawyers argued for him to be freed immediately after he spent more than a year in detention. They offered an atypical presentation at the sentencing hearing, reflecting Combs as a wealthy and philanthropic celebrity. On Friday, Combs addressed the court for the first time, having not spoken during his trial. Speaking to the court before his sentencing, Combs called his past behaviour disgusting, shameful and sick, apologising to the people he hurt, including his children. He said his acts of domestic violence were a burden he would carry for the rest of his life, and he said he wanted to personally apologise to his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, for any harm he caused her. He said he had lost his career and destroyed his reputation. "I have been humbled and broken to my core. I hate myself right now. I've been stripped down to nothing." He said that the prosecution's argument he has not changed is wrong, saying, "I am truly sorry for it all. I beg your honour for mercy, to be a father again, a son again, and be a leader in my community again." The defence also showed an 11-minute video portraying Combs' career and family life, showing him with his children and trying to inspire others in the public settings. Several minutes into the video, Combs put a hand over his face and started to cry. The day before his sentencing, the rapper submitted a letter to Judge Aaron showing remorse and blaming his past behaviour on drug addiction. In the 4-page letter, he apologised for all of the hurt and pain that I have caused others by my conduct and said he would never commit another crime if released. The old me died in jail and the new version of me was reborn. He wrote of his 13 months reincarnation at the Metropolitan Detention Centre in Brooklyn that previously held R. Kelly and Ghislaine Maxwell. The judge said the tone of the letter was inappropriate after prosecutor Chrissy Slavic said it amounted to bullying and had caused one victim who had previously testified during the trial under Palladium, Mia, to change her mind about addressing the court before the sentence was handed down on Friday. 6 of Comm's 7 children pleaded for leniency and emotional address in front of the judge. My father is a superhero, Comm's son Justin said during the hearing. Seeing him broken down of everything is something we'll never forget. Comm's sentencing comes after a high-profile 7-week federal trial, which wrapped up in July and featured testimony from more than 30 witnesses, including rapper Kid Cudi and Comm's former girlfriend, Cassandra Cassie Ventura. During the trial, 2 women, Miss Ventura, and women who testified under the Palladium Jane described being beaten, threatened, sexually assaulted, and blackmailed by Combs. Prosecutors said Combs concurred the women into participating in sex acts with prostitutes during drug-fueled parties while he watched and sometimes filmed. Miss Ventura referred to those multi-day sexual marathons as freak-offs during her 4 days of her testimony. Following the trial, Combs was denied bail and returned to jail, where he has been sentenced since September 2024. And there you go. That is it this lunchtime. Charlotte Hawkins will be here with the evening news at 6:30. The news where you are follows the national weather. But from all of us here this lunchtime, thank you for watching and bye-bye.